Have you looked at your electric bill lately? If so, yeah, probably not the best. And there's a lot of reasons behind the why your electric bill is so high. Is it public policy? Is it inflation? Is it AI infrastructure in data centers, electric cars, or is maybe a combination of all that and more? Let's discuss that. Joining us here on the Brian Nichols Show is Isaac Orr. Isaac, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Dealing with my myriad technical difficulties on my end, so it's great to be with you, Brian, and talk about electricity prices. And if your listeners are lucky, they might get a guest appearance from my dog, who I think is right here. So
There you go.
we're good.
I've had so many pet guest appearances. We just had Natalie Nicole on the show, and her cat made an appearance. The all-time best pet introduction was, well, they actually never made it on screen, but the pet sounded, and it was I had Carla Garrick up in New Hampshire in the show, and there was this just repeated like thud noise that we were hearing in the show, and all of a
Oh
sudden she
no.
goes, "Can you guys wait a second? Because there's a woodpecker pecking against my door." And that ended up being, the funniest, I think, of the pet introductions. But with that being said, Isaac, welcome to the show. Let's talk a little bit about electric bills. Right now we're seeing it across the board. Electric bills are skyrocketing, and a lot of people are asking why. Is it because inflation? Is it because all these data centers are popping up across the country, these big black boxes? Or is it Elon's supercharger for the Teslas? Like what is the rising cost here for the electric bills really related to? And I guess maybe give us just the kind of quick and dirty answer. What do you see?
Yeah, Brian, it's actually none of the above.
No
So
kidding.
it's none of the above. So like we'll talk about each of those things individually in a little bit, but ultimately electricity prices, especially where like I'm in Minnesota, you're in Indiana, so we're all part of like the same regional electric grid. And, we have our electric companies, but those are all monopoly utility companies, right? So if you have NIPSCO or if you have Duke, you kind of just are in their territory and you have to buy power from them regardless of whether you want to or not. So that's the way it works. So and Minnesota, I have Excel Energy. It sucks, but that's the world I live in. So the business model for monopoly utilities is the exact opposite of the business model of every other business in the country, basically, which is what makes unwinding what's making electricity prices so expensive really difficult for like the average person to understand. Because like the average person may or may not even look at their electric bill. They just they notice that this looks higher than it was a few years ago when I would just look at my bank statement or the auto pay or whatever. But the way it works is because electric utilities are monopoly, allowed to charge whatever they want for electricity because that would be unfair. They have no competition. So, in lieu of competition, the price of electricity is actually governed by the government. Essentially, the government sets the price of electricity based on a formula called the cost of service formula. And I'm not going to get super in the weeds about this. I don't want anybody's eyes to glaze over. But like I said the F word formula, but that doesn't mean it needs to get overly complicated. So, what cost of service formula means is the utility company gets to charge enough money to make back the cost of like whatever it spends. It gets to like increase the cost in order to make up for that. So, let's say you want to build new wind turbines. Okay, cool. The utility is going to charge you enough to pay for those new wind turbines, plus like a 10% profit on top of that.
If you're focused on long-term health but tired of overcomplicated wellness trends, you already know the frustration. Too many products promise miracles and deliver chaos. Cardio Miracle keeps it simple. It supports nitric oxide and blood flow, foundational elements of heart health, stamina, and overall performance. That means better energy, better workouts, and better recovery, without forcing your body into extremes. If you want health support that actually makes sense, and to get 15% off your order, visit cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to learn more.
So what we've seen, especially in places like Indiana, where prices have increased almost twice as fast as the national average, it's been really bad there. We've seen the utility companies closing down their reliable, low-cost coal plants and replacing them with a mixture of wind, solar, and battery storage and natural gas. So ultimately, those are the trends that are kind of influencing prices in places like Minnesota, Indiana, Colorado. And the thing about it is, like, it's a big country, and all of the different states have their own regulations when it comes to electricity prices. It's actually like one of we have a report out at Always On Energy Research called Blue States High Rates, where we look at which states have the highest electricity prices in the country. And it kind of looks like an electoral map of the United States. And the reason behind that is because in the early 1900s, Congress said, okay, well, we're going to give the states a lot of power to regulate their own electricity sector. So the Federal Power Act specifically delegated that, the ability for states to choose, okay, do we want to go heavy hydro, coal? Those were kind of the options back when we started building power plants. Oil was a big one. So you see this kind of experiment with federalism in power prices across the country because they really are just a product of state policy.
This is where I'm going to give you the objection I'm sure you hear. But when I look, Isaac, at my electric bill and I look at the increase in cost, I see a direct correlation. This is what your layman will see or say, between that and the data centers and the superchargers, and you name the new toy that's out there in the electric, drawing from the electric grid space. So with this narrative, why is there such a belief there? Because obviously where there's smoke, there should be fire, right?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but there's also this big increase in the capital expenditure. So let me get back to this cost of service formula because I don't feel like I flushed that out right. So the utility is allowed to recoup the money whenever it spends money. It's allowed to increase the cost of electricity in order to make up for that cost. And when we have a system where we're getting rid of the the existing coal plants on the system, which have been depreciated, so they're therefore no longer earning the utility a profit, and we're building wind, solar, gas, then that is ultimately a huge part of it. The other part is transmission and distribution. So, like, we have a very old electric grid. It's like a lot of these poles and wires are over 60 years old, and they were naturally coming up on being ready to replace regardless. So essentially what happened is, I guess the one last thing I'll say about this, like the power prices that we are experiencing today are the result of decisions made 10 years ago. So when you have a system that's a regulated monopoly, right? So in Indiana, you have to go to the Utility Commission. I believe that's what it's called in Indiana. And if Duke wants to shut down a power plant, or more likely NIPSCO wants to shut down a coal plant, for example, they have to get permission from the regulator in order to do that, because otherwise utility companies would shut down their old stuff and build new stuff all the time, because that is what they are financially incentivized to do. So all of this stuff happens in a process called like an integrated resource plan. And essentially what happens is, like, the utility says, well, this is the lowest cost way we have to meet our future electricity demand. And the utility regulator will say, well, yes or no, we don't agree with this assumption or that assumption. It's like a very long back and forth. It's interesting to me because I'm an energy nerd, but ultimately it's very boring for everyone else. Like, nobody would want to participate in this, let alone, like, most people don't even understand there is a utility commission, and that, let alone like follow closely what's happening there. But like, the decisions to shut down coal plants have been made, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now that's happening. You're starting to see, like, I believe NIPSCO is the ones that built that solar facility recently that got destroyed by the tornado in Indiana. So, like, those investments already occurred, and now we're seeing that increase the rates. So the thing about data centers is most of them haven't been built yet. A lot of them are in the planning phases. A lot of them have been announced, but like, they haven't actually been built yet. So, and ultimately, there are parts of the country where increasing the amount of demand on the system actually reduces the cost for everyone else. So, when we think about this cost of service formula, you have a situation where the costs your electricity rates are essentially the cost of providing the service to you divided by the number of kilowatt hours that you purchase. So if we think about it in terms of a car, I think it's easier to do it this way. So like let's think about a car in terms of the cost of driving your car on a per mile basis. You have your upfront cost that you pay down, like your upfront payment. You've got so let's call it your capital cost. You've got the loan that you're doing every month, you've got insurance, you've got maintenance, and then you divide that by the number of miles. And then you can kind of get a cost per mile. And that's essentially all an electricity rate is doing. It's taking all the expenses that the utility company has, dividing them by the total, amount of electricity that it's selling. So if you increase the denominator there, increase the amount of money that electricity that you're selling, you can actually reduce the rates for everybody else. And that's why it's really interesting. In North Dakota and New Mexico, electricity prices are falling because the oil industry is consuming so much electricity that is bringing down rates for everybody else. So theoretically, data centers could bring prices down for people if there's enough slack left in the system to absorb that additional demand. But what we've seen in a lot of areas like the eastern part of the country, like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, they shut down a lot of their existing reliable plants. And now the data centers are moving in and the prices are going up as a result of the fact that, they don't have enough reliable capacity in those areas to meet their projected peak demand. So, you can do it smart or you can do it really dumb like they did out east. And I think North Dakota shows how you can do it in a wise way. And I think, Indiana could do that too. Like there's a bunch of existing coal plants on the system. I think keeping those open as long as possible or like selling those to a private data center developer, they could take it behind the meter. Like that all makes a lot of sense. Like the dumbest thing you can do is follow in the footsteps of Maryland or New Jersey or New England states, New York, where you are prematurely shutting down the things that work regardless of the weather. Like Winter Storm Fern, we saw that wind and solar did not do so hot, but the coal fleet, the natural gas fleet, the nuclear fleet, those are kinds of the things that work best when the chips are down. So, let's develop things the smart way. I feel bad saying this. I don't quite know what a data center does. Like I kind of have like this fuzzy understanding of like, oh, okay, it enables ChatGPT, but like I couldn't tell you how it functions, right? Like it's kind of this black box like you alluded to earlier, but I'm not reflectively against them. I just don't know the argument for them either. It's just kind of like, oh, it's going to revolutionize everything. Like, okay, cool, I guess. So
I'll give was it TLDR as they used to say
yeah,
to your kids,
TLDR.
right?
Let's do it.
So
Yeah,
my day job for folks who are playing along in the home game, I work in the telco space and I do a lot in what's called unified communications and customer experience, which is bridging into this world of AI. And data centers have been in my world though for a long time because a lot of the companies that I used to sell back when I was a technology advisor, they are hosted, which means that their data servers that they will put into the cloud, that means that they're hosted somewhere. I mean they live somewhere physically in terms of infrastructure.
sure.
That is going to be in a data center more likely than not. And the idea being is that more often when you have multiple data centers, it's for redundancies. So if I'm a phone provider, right? If I were to have my server, which is literally like think of your old desktop, right? Back, when we'd have desktops, like that is a server, and that would be basically the brains to your phone system. Well, God forbid, you come in one day and the power's out, right? Like now all of a
Sure.
sudden that phone system cannot be accessed. So what companies did was they said, well, let's multi-locate these servers in geographically redundant locations, and they all started to use these things called data centers, because you would have basically co-located spaces where multiple companies would tenant their servers, and then you'd have a company run the data center. So you fast forward to 2026 and AI, right, is now it's everywhere, and they need data centers to help not only co-locate but also power, where they're putting these chips that are going to be helping run the brains basically behind these AI tools that are coming out. That now becomes the brains and the the needed resources for AI to leverage, right? So if you think of like a server that would host a phone system, right? That only requires a fraction of the data that the AI tools need because these
Sure.
AI tools are accessing massive, massive data sets. So to say all that, these data centers, they're not going to be these, these magic, do everything, types of solutions, but rather they're a tool, right? They're a tool
Sure.
to the underlying, or rather, they are the underlying infrastructure to now these AI resources that are going to be out there, not just in the Chat GPT world, but also we're seeing this in the like the farming world, for example, where AI is now being leveraged to use lasers to eradicate weeds versus using your different like your sprays and your pesticides. So just one application where that has to be powered by something. Tesla, you go out and you drive your Tesla, right? That's full self driving. That's being powered by AI. So the brains behind that AI, the data set needed, it's so much memory, right? So much space. And that's where
Sure.
these data centers come in. Now, I'll segue this to I have heard some data centers that are being proposed, and there's actually one being proposed right down the road from where I live here in Indiana, and people are having an uproar right now. But I've actually heard that not only will it not be taking from the electric grid, but there's more likely than not a circumstance where it will be putting electricity back onto the grid because I think this one maybe it has like a mini nuke like reactor or something. I forget the details there, but I've heard a lot of these data centers being built with some of these different resource allocation methods in place where they're actually going to give
Yeah.
back to the grid. Talk to us a little bit more. Is that kind of going hand in hand with what you were talking about up in North Dakota with the pricing, or just a different beast?
Well, essentially what's happening is the amount of demand that's on the power grid for AI and for advanced manufacturing is exploding. It's just kind of this unprecedented growth in electricity demand, or at least nothing that we have seen in the last 100 years. So it's a huge increase in the overall power plant need that we have as a country. So in places like North Dakota, yeah, when I talk to people on the Economic Development Commission there, they tell the people who are trying to develop data centers, like, look, if you build your own power plant, build one bigger than you think you need it, so that way you can sell it back to the rest of us. And that's happening in other states. I think Pennsylvania and Ohio are looking at things like that. But ultimately, there's also a bunch of places in Texas. It's interesting. There are data centers that are completely quote unquote behind the meter. So essentially, people are building these large power campuses off of the main grid, which is the Electric Reliability Council of ERCOT or of Texas, or ERCOT as it's called. So there's been like kind of a federalist approach to this too, where some states are embracing this kind of consumer regulated electricity, is what they call it, where the companies build and operate their own power plants for their data centers, and that is a tool to prevent the cost from being spread to other consumers, which I think is cool. And then in other states, they just have established electricity prices that essentially require the data centers to pay for 75, 80% of the new infrastructure that they are necessitating. So the rest of the residential, commercial, industrial ratepayers are still on the hook for 20% of that cost in that circumstance. And I think that is, I understand why. Traditionally, that's been how the power system has interconnected new users. So, like if you had a steel mill go in, it would be kind of a similar circumstance. Um, and I think that worked historically, but we are talking. I think I saw the most recent projections for $1.4 trillion in spending on new power plant infrastructure in the next 5 years, which is
It's a
just
big number.
insane. Yeah, yeah. And it's just 20% of 1.4 trillion is a lot of money, and that is going to increase the cost for everyday consumers in a big way. So, there's the more people I talk to, like I talked to some guys down in Arizona, and Arizona is a big place for data centers right now. And the issue is who's going to end up paying, or like if you decide that you're going to create a electricity price for data centers that is high enough to, recoup the cost of upgrading your transmission distribution system for them, then maybe they just decide they want to go somewhere else where they get more of a free ride. So the electric company wants to sell that power to the data center because they, want to increase their sales and revenues and things like that. So you kind of have this, I don't know, race to the bottom type deal where, traditionally the data centers have gotten tax breaks from local municipalities in order to move there. I think we're past that now. I think we've moved from subsidized to data centers to I don't know if soak is the right word, but I think that people have kind of moved on from like, oh, we want to incentivize them to come here to, well, if they're going to come here, we're not really in favor of it. So you better sweeten the deal. So, like, you got to grease palms a little bit, which I don't necessarily have a problem with either, right? Like, I don't like it when we have, these tax increment financing areas where certain businesses don't have to pay their property taxes for 20 or 30 years and the rest of the people have to end up paying for the services that business uses. So governments like to do that because it makes it look, they get to have like a fancy ribbon cutting event and make it look like they're doing something, but ultimately all they're doing is possibly incentivizing a business to start operating that didn't really have a business model that was worth incentivizing in the first place and shifting costs to taxpayers. So, ultimately what I want for data centers is, I think that they should be um, paying their fair share when it comes to taxes. I know that that's like kind of a slippery slope when you just say fair share. Like, what does that mean? But the same rate as everybody else, and pay your own way for electricity prices.
So let's talk about the part you were hinting at earlier, and that is the production of energy piece. The reality, I think, a lot of us have unfortunately, when we lived in these Northeast states, like I lived in New York and Pennsylvania for a number of years, is
Mm,
that you have a lot of these cities, right, or these blue states that they just, from a policy perspective, Isaac, they're not gonna reopen those coal plants, right? They're not gonna go back, despite how painful it might be. And I guess to that, what options are there to help a, incentivize competition, but B, to give some sense of price relief?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think the blue states actually have more recourse to reduce prices
Hmm.
than red states do because all they need to do is stop doing some of the really dumb stuff that they've been doing historically. So, New England and I believe it's Maryland, New Jersey, and now Virginia, maybe Delaware, but they're all part of this carbon trading system, cap and trade. It's called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Essentially, it adds a like carbon fee to every megawatt hour of electricity that emits CO2 emissions. So, like, all they would have to do is leave Reggie, and then they would not have to pay for those like extra emissions later. And those funds are either directly given back to consumers like they are in New Hampshire, or they are used to fund all manner of boondoggle, green energy projects in states like I think Pennsylvania and Maryland. So
Well, and
in
really
that
quick, how do you fight the
yeah,
ideological person? Because this is where more I'm getting at is that a lot of folks in the Northeast, Isaac, they don't do things because they're logical or rational, right? They
for
do things
sure.
because they are more on the opposite side of warm and fuzzies, despite it going to lead to very real negatives down the road, right? And we're seeing this where I used to live in New York with their ban on gas stoves, right? And and
Yeah,
and the unintended consequences there. So, like, I hear what you're saying, like, all they have to do is leave this silly, ideological organization that they founded, but, like, is that realistic with the folks who are really, I mean, they are the folks who are the policymakers as well as the voters up there, and by the way, elephant in the room, a lot of voters who were more of that centrist, moderate, or even more conservative leaning folk, they probably left during COVID, and they went to more, warmer red states like,
that's right.
Florida or elsewhere. So, I mean, that's the other voting reality those states had to unfortunately deal with.
Well, that's true. I like to joke the beatings will continue until policy improves. And ultimately, they have to make that decision for themselves. And I think that we're starting to see some green shoots in places like New York, where the New York Energy Agency, I forget what it's called, is NYSERDA is the shorthand for it, but they released a report just like a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, saying that implementing the climate policies that were enacted in 2019 would increase costs on a per household basis by like $4,000. And like that was very much a shockwave. So will the New York legislature repeal that law? Probably not, but at least Kathy Hochul understands that it is a huge liability in the upcoming midterm election. So she's saying, well, no, we ought to reevaluate this or revisit it
Is it
at
though?
the.
And that's why I'm pushing him. Like New York, like is she really?
I
Is
don't
it
think
more?
so. I think it's a ploy. I think it's to look good for the election and save her hide a little bit. But at least she's paying some lip service to the fact that, like,
That's fair.
my whole thing is, if blue state policies make like electricity so affordable, why are they repealing them, or why are they walking back from them? Like, that is the question that we need to be asking and holding the feet to the fire for these people. There's folks in Massachusetts that are looking at delaying the timeline and not incentivizing heat pumps to like basically force people off of their gas furnaces in Massachusetts. So we are starting to see things where folks in the Northeast, governors, are saying, well, maybe we need to rely on natural gas longer, or maybe we ought to be investing in nuclear. And these are big changes from where we were 5 years ago, when everyone
Yeah.
said wind, solar, and batteries is going to be a panacea. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be better. And we're all like idiots if we don't start doing this right now. So it's just going to require more pain. Like the ideology will collide with the physics of how the grid works. And if they're smart, or they don't like being charged more than they ought to for energy, then they'll change their policy. But if, as you say, a lot of those folks have decided to move to saner places, then it'll take more pain before they decide to reverse course. But ultimately, that's kind of the only choice they have.
H.L. Mencken, the idea of democracy is that the common person knows what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. I guess
I love
they're
that. That's one of
right.
my favorite quotes of all time.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Oh, Mencken, he's got some bangers. But always on energy research. Let's go ahead as we're going towards the tail end of the episode here.
Sure.
Just fill us in what you guys are doing over there. I know we had Sarah Monteballo on the show I guess a year plus at this point or
Oh
so
man.
ago. Yeah, I know time flies. The days are long, but the years are
Sure
short.
does. That's right.
But tell us,
That's how everyone describes their podcast. The days are long, but the years are short.
well, I've been doing this since 2018, so that'll do it. But tell us more about Always on Energy Research and a little bit more of the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're an energy modeling firm. We look at the cost of different policies throughout the country. So we look at a lot of state renewable energy mandates or policies that the Biden administration was implementing in terms of regulations on coal and natural gas plants. So what we want to do is we want to bring solid numbers to the debate so we can have an actual discussion about the costs and benefits of respective power portfolios. And then we also have a Substack called Energy Bad Boys. So if people are interested, they should check out aoenergy.org and Energy Bad Boys on Substack.
There we go. All right, folks. Well, if you got some value from today's episode, you know the drill. Go ahead and give it a share. When you do, tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty on X, Facebook, and Twitter. Wait, no, X and Twitter are the same thing. X, Facebook, and Instagram. There we go. Yeah, my producer's like, hey, get it right. Also, folks, if you want to go ahead and watch the Brian Nichols Show, yes, you can go ahead to your favorite streaming platform like YouTube, Rumble, wherever it is you consume your video content, 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday evenings. We will have a brand new episode hit your video playlists. So, of course, hit that subscribe button as well in your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube Music. Take the Brian Nichols Show on the go. And of course, if you are watching us on your Tesla, you can watch it right there on the YouTube Music app, Spotify app, or wherever it is you like to. Don't watch and drive, right? Full self-driving is pretty cool, but no, don't watch and drive it. That's no bueno. I do not condone. And as for my final plug is that if you enjoy the Brian Nichols Show, support the folks who support us, like our phenomenal sponsors, like our studio sponsor here, Cardio Miracle. Scan the little QR code over my shoulder or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, and you'll know you're at the right spot because you see a little notification at the top of your screen saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols. But with that being said, Isaac, or any final words for the audience before we say goodbye today?
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a blast. Well, folks, there you go. There's your call to action. Go ahead, give today's episode a share. But with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Isaac Orr. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.